Hello, legacy builders, and welcome back to another episode of the Legacy Pregame Podcast. I am Marcella and Mollon-Williams, behavioral financial advisor, mindset coach, and legacy strategist for first generation legacy wealth builders.
And I am your co host, Mark Mollon, investment advisor, legacy strategist. And together we are your legacy building duo, guiding first gen income earners like you from wealth creation to generational impact, one intentional move at a time.
So, today, Mark, we are tackling a topic that can make or break your wealth journey. That's the difference between risk tolerance and risk capacity. So most people think they're the same thing, but we're going to show you why understanding the difference is critical to protecting your wealth, building confidence, and securing your legacy.
There's this recent study by the FINRA that found out that nearly 40% of investors overestimate their ability to handle market downturns. So we're talking about negative volatility when it comes to your investment in the market. And when those volatility hits, with their actions, like panic selling, oh my goodness, my portfolio is going down, let me sell. Well, that doesn't match their stated comfort level, and that's a big one. So some of our clients, they come in ready to swing for the fences, right? They're like, I'm all in. I want to be as aggressive as possible because I want returns, returns, returns. So yeah, they're going to go all in, right? And they say, I'm not afraid of risk. I can handle risk. But their actual financial position, or what we call their capacity, cannot support their level of exposure, right? So this what we call this mismatch can lead to financial stress, missed goals, and even legacy breakdown. Again, we're about legacy, right? So we don't want these things impacting not just our financial situation today, but then also our legacy in the future.
Well said, Mark. Before we go any further, I want to make sure we really clearly define what each one is because I think you laid it out really well. But I want to make sure our listeners really understand what we're talking about. So I'll cover risk tolerance and you can cover risk capacity. Okay.
I think that's fair. Yes, I can
Okay.
handle
So you can handle it. Okay.
that. Yes,
So let's start with risk tolerance, since that's the one I think we hear that more often. Would you agree, Mark? I know
yes,
that's the one I
I would
first come
say
up
definitely
with, and
yes.
I use that regularly. Risk tolerance is your emotional willingness to take risk. So it's like your emotional comfort zone. It's how much uncertainty you can handle without losing sleep at night, without second guessing yourself, questioning every decision. That's what risk tolerance is about. But the thing is with risk tolerance is that it is subjective. So your tolerance can change based off the latest headlines, whatever you're scrolling, whatever is showing up on social media. It's based on your upbringing, the way you grew up, what you heard, what you didn't hear, or whether you're comparing yourself to others, to your friends, family, strangers on social media. It goes up and down depending on your environment. So it's very important to understand that risk tolerance is subjective for all of those reasons.
So, Marcella, it sounds like risk tolerance is very volatile. If we're talking about how it's based on emotions or your environment, who you're talking to, what you're reading, and everything, that's not in my definition. And you can aid in this. That's not really a foundation you want to build your financial future on being reactive based on the environment, based on who you're talking to. And that's where when we look at risk capacity and in alignment with risk tolerance, well, risk capacity is your objective ability to take risks, right? So in other words, it's what your financial life can actually withstand. So it's about the tangible resources you have. So
Yeah.
whether it's your income, whether it's your assets, your liabilities, that would include savings, even your time horizon, how much time you have till retirement, how long is your retirement? All these play an impact when it comes to your risk capacity, right? So it's
Mhm.
very different. It's almost formulated as far as what you have. That time frame will determine what that risk capacity is.
Yeah.
And hopefully it's very clear that there is a difference between the two.
Yeah, no, and that's well said because, as we said, risk tolerance is subjective. It's, as you said, volatile, whereas risk capacity, objective, and
Yes.
it's fixed. And that's what you're talking about as far as formulaic. It doesn't care about your feelings, which is a good
Mhm.
thing. If you're 55 and you have 5 years away from your retirement, your capacity is very different from someone who's 35 with 30 years ahead of them. How you respond to the market really shows up in this area. So as coaches, we see that people often confuse these two, as we said earlier. We see that regularly. They think they can handle risk because
Yes.
they feel bold, in that moment. They feel like they can handle it, or, there's external influences that are emboldening them to take bigger risks until their
Mhm.
emotions get tested. And we see this all the time, Mark. We see it both angles. And I'll let you add to that.
Well, let me give a quick story here because it's so relevant what you're just sharing here. We work with many different individuals and couples, and this one couple in particular, they came to us with two very different perspectives when it comes to their risk tolerance. So the wife, and to be fair here, it doesn't matter who you are, your risk tolerance is your risk tolerance. So in this example, the wife has a low risk tolerance, right? What she is comfortable with. She's not a big fan of volatility. She just doesn't like to see any negative movement in her portfolio. It just makes her a little unsettled, uncomfortable. While her husband is the complete opposite. He does not mind high tolerance. I mean, excuse me. He has a high tolerance
Hmm.
for volatility, right? He doesn't mind negative volatility because his thing is he wants to get returns. He's comfortable with the fact that, hey, I don't mind taking short-term losses because I just want to get as much returns as possible, right? So the problem, well, their risk capacity is moderate, which means that they have goals of funding, their college for their children, caring for aging parents, securing their retirement, doing all these things. So while they're willing to, well, specifically one person is willing to go it all in as far as the capacity of being high in their tolerance, well, their financial position, where their assets are right now, doesn't support that level of risk. And that's a big deal because I would kind of look at it like you're going to Vegas, which I would never recommend as far as financial planning, and saying, hey, I have $1,000. I'm just going to go all in. All right. So let's just use the uh, any game you like to play at Vegas. Would you take everything you have? Right. And we're not talking about discretionary money. We're talking about this is your life savings and you're just going to put it all in. Well, the average person would say, no, I wouldn't do that. That's too much risk. But in a sense, that's what we're doing when we don't have the appropriate capability to take on additional risks. If something was to happen, what do you have to fall back on? So it's very important to understand, as Marcella and I have been talking about, the risk tolerance, but also be aware of what is your risk capabilities. So
Mhm. Such
Marcella,
important
that's
parts. No,
exactly.
yeah, and I know with this couple, it's so important, this is the important part of working with coaches like Mark and I, and specifically dealing with the money psychology and the money behavior, because we focus on alignment. And in this case, we were able to align their portfolio with their actual capacity, as you were just saying, Mark, their actual capacity, not what they thought it was, not their tolerance, but the capacity, and create a plan that helped, especially the wife, feel emotionally safe. That tapped into their core values of what was important to them both now, so they can live within their legacy and leave a legacy. And this gave them both so much clarity and peace. And that right there is the importance of knowing the difference. It shows up in real time, in dollars and cents, in your planning, and most importantly, in peace of mind. We cannot overlook that.
Marcella, I was just going to say, we can't talk about that piece enough, because one of the things that you and I have seen time and time again when we're working with couples is
Mhm.
that this perspective that, well, I'm at a higher risk tolerance, so therefore my spouse should be at a higher risk tolerance, or vice versa, right? I'm
Yeah,
at a lower risk tolerance, so my spouse, my partner, should be at a lower risk tolerance. And the truth of the matter is, no one's right or wrong. It's just how you feel about the market. So the first thing we need to understand, if you have a significant other, is understanding and respecting their tolerance, because it's not right or wrong. It's what they are comfortable with, right? And leave
absolutely.
it to the coaches to help with creating the alignment, as you said, Marcella, when it comes to their portfolio and their feelings, right? Putting those
Right.
together in a way so that they're getting the most out of it.
And let me
And
just add one thing, Mark. I'm just gonna
oh,
add one
that's
more
what we
thing.
do. Yeah.
Yeah, because as we're talking about this, I just like going through my head, I'm thinking of the as the clients that I've worked through, because as we have the premarital financial counseling course
Yes. Yes.
that
Well,
I
that's what I was kind of thinking, right?
right, 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 right,
Mhm.
exactly. Because I mean, we work with individuals as they're engaged and within 1 year of marriage, but of course, we work with couples who have been married for a long time, and we experience this
Yes.
both. But when it comes to the premarital part, I feel like this is the area I'm really navigating in that area, helping them to learn the difference between each other's and between risk tolerance and risk capacity, but more so what you just spoke about there, and that's understanding each other's risk tolerance within that area. And then funneling it through the capacity, leading to the capacity.
We
That
might
seems
have
to
to
be
do
the
a
number one thing.
we
Oh,
have to we're gonna have to have a podcast on
okay,
it.
good. You were see,
We're on the
that's
same
you and
page.
I. I was gonna say that.
Really.
Look, listeners, expect an upcoming episode just dealing with couples.
Exactly. Because
Yes,
this
absolutely.
anyway, let's leave some material for that podcast.
Yes. Yeah, we're not gonna add any more.
So what we can do in the meantime is continue this conversation when it comes to understanding the risk tolerance and the risk capacity. So let's bring in some little stats here, because
Yeah.
again, when we're talking about investing, we're not going to go by feeling, we're not going to go by what's trending. We're going to use statistics. Let's look at the studies. Let's look at the science. Like, sometimes I feel like that's a taboo these days, but let's face it. To make sure that we all have an opportunity to gain, we need to look at those things that have been studied and researched to make sure that, number one, it's duplicatable,
Yeah.
right? And that's the big thing here. So let's look at Morningstar. Morningstar is an independent company that actually does studies on investors' behaviors and how their portfolios are aligned with those behaviors. So it's a great resource that we use quite often. And one of their reports showed that investors who misjudge their risk profiles, confusing tolerance with capacity, are twice as likely to underperform their peers because they abandon their strategy at the wrong time. So to make it even simpler, you swing for the fences. Oh, just give me the most aggressive portfolio, and as soon as the market takes a negative swing, you start to pull back. Oh my goodness, I made a mistake. Oh my goodness, I'm not comfortable with this. Whatever excuse you decide to give yourself permission to say, let me pull back from the strategy that I recommended, or that when I say I mean the individual thinks that they need, right? So we want to be very clear here. What is the study
Yeah.
showing? That if you're not aligned, you're misjudging, it can impact you financially, not just your current scenario, but also your future.
Mhm.
And this is where we
Financial self-sabotage, right, Mark?
financial self sabotage. Couldn't say it better. Exactly. And
Mhm.
and and Marcel, I'll let you go into the framework, but this is what we need to remember, right? It's not about how brave you feel in this moment, right? Oh, I'm willing to accept this because of whatever the circumstances. It's about balancing how much you can take on as far as the risk and how much you want to be able to take on based on the assets you have around you. You want to make sure that those are aligned. So it's you, the individual, and then it's the tangible assets you have, and those two have to work together. So
Mhm.
let's go into how to look at this in the way so that people investors like yourselves can put it all together within a framework.
Right, because we're not just gonna talk about the problem and the risk and all
Exactly.
that's involved here. We wanna offer a solution, and as always, that is why we created the legacy pregame framework to help you break it down. It's not just one part of the framework or one letter, it's the whole thing. So let's go through it together, see how you can use the framework to make sure, as Marcus said, that you are balancing your risk. So remember, L is for legacy lens, right? We start by asking, what's the legacy I want others to experience from me? And just a reminder, this is all in your clarity workbook that you could download at legacypregamepodcast.com. So again, L, legacy lens. So ask yourself and be clear on your risk profile. What is the big picture when you're looking at your risk profile, when you're considering it? What is the big picture that it is serving? You have to be clear on that. Okay. So then E, for the sake of time, let me just run through that. E, emotional mastery. Here you want to recognize that tolerance is emotional. You need tools to manage your reactions. Absolutely, absolutely need tools to manage your reactions. And this is so you don't sabotage your future. Again, about that sabotage. So make sure you have the tools, and you can always go back and listen to previous episode because that's what we're constantly bringing you is tools for emotional mastery. So
Mhm.
equip yourself with those tools. The third is G, generational goals. Your capacity should always be measured against your long term goals. Let me just say that again. Your capacity should always be measured against your long term goals. Are you preserving wealth for the next generation or just chasing a short term return? You know, that's what we're doing, just chasing short term returns. So that's hard to say altogether
I
there.
know, right?
Okay.
I'm glad you're saying it. So,
Yeah.
well,
But
let
that
me,
we chasing. But yeah, I'm gonna let you continue with
yeah.
the framework. Go ahead, Mark.
So I will go into A. So legacy, we have A, and that's the alignment audit. So that's what we're touching on today. Are your investments aligned with both your tolerance and your capacity, or are you overexposed
Mm,
or underexposed? Right. So we're talking about being overexposed, but a lot of times you can be underexposed, not getting enough returns you need to get to your financial goals. Then we have C for capital strategy. Is there, not is there, but this is where we engineer your portfolio for both tolerance and capacity in mind. So you understand the difference between your risk tolerance and your risk capacity. Now we create a strategy to implement the two together. So now it's working with you, which will now introduce you to why and legacy, which is your next move. Once you know the difference, your next move becomes clear. Investing with confidence and have the resilience to do so, right? So, and those two are very important, the confidence and the resilience, because you want to be comfortable today, but as Marcella mentioned earlier, based on your environment, based on who you're talking to, you also want to have the resilience to maintain your strategy, maintain your confidence when everybody else is telling you that the world's ending, when everyone is telling you that the market's crashing and never going to return, when everyone's telling you there's no jobs, when everyone just bombarded by that negative news, you can remain confident and you can remain resilient. And when it comes to your tolerance and your capacity, you want to make sure they are aligned within a framework. So it's not only avoiding costly mistakes, but also builds, as I mentioned, the resilience into your wealth strategy. So all these
mhm.
things are important. So as Marcella mentioned, make sure you understand. Go to our website. I'll provide more details shortly, but go to the website and make sure you get the tools in place to help you to stay aligned with your emotions and your strategy.
Absolutely, Mark. So at this time, let's take them through our pregame practice, our legacy pregame practice.
Mhm.
So, as always, pull out your journal, paper, pen, and let's get practical with what we've shared with you today and how to apply it. So
And
first, oh, go ahead.
Marcella, before we get started here,
All
I
right.
have a comment that I was talking to someone and they were they were talking about our Legacy Pray Game podcast, and they were saying, Marcella must have been a teacher in her past life or something because she's always giving up homework. She's always giving us homework, but she loves it though. She says she loves it, but I was actually moved by that because it's not just about telling you or sharing stories, but it's about taking action. So I just wanted to give you that bit of information that there are people out there recognizing the homework and doing it. So please
Uh,
continue to.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, Mark. That made my day. Because yes, I was telling someone the other day, I am definitely a teacher at heart. Like, I, yes, I want to put it to action. I'm like, okay, I'm going to tell you
Exactly.
information, but I need to make sure it's getting in there. So yes, thank you so
Exactly.
much.
Exactly.
Well, I guess back to the assignment now. Our pregame practice. So let's put some work into this. Let's first start with assessing your tolerance. All right. So here's where we start. Ask yourself questions. Y'all know how I feel about questions. Ask yourself, how did I feel during the last market downturn? It's a great way to start. If you panicked, then your tolerance probably is lower than you thought. So process that. Go back and think about that. Two, measure your capacity. Look at your income. Mark talked about this, your income, your debt, your savings, and your time horizon. That's your financial reality. So you cannot ignore that part. All right. So assess your tolerance, measure your capacity, and then find the overlap. This is the sweet spot where your tolerance and your capacity meet. That's where your true risk profile is. All right. And then the last one is adjust as needed. This isn't a one and done thing. This is like, look, life is a journey, and we're going to process it as such. So as life changes, marriage, kids, career shift, whatever is happening, it is so important that you revisit this regularly. So you go through each step over again.
Excellent. And one of the biggest things that we can't overemphasize enough is you don't want to do this alone. Some of the things that Marcella just mentioned to you as far as the assignment, you may not have clear understanding. You may not understand, hey, how do I measure my capacity? Well, we don't want you to do it alone. This is where a trusted advisor, hint, hint, can help
Hint,
you
hint,
with you or a framework like what we're talking about can help you stay objective when it comes to your emotions taking over. That's a big deal for us here. We want to put you in a position where you have a clear plan. So again, when the environment tries to derail you, you can stay true to your plan and again be comfortable and have that coaching in place so that we can make sure that you're still in alignment, because we all have experienced times when things are unforeseen, unexpected, along with the things that are expected and so on. So you want to make sure no matter what happens, you're still being true to your underlying plan of that legacy building, right? That's why we're here.
Yeah. And Mark, I just, thinking back at a previous episode when we talked about biases, what's coming to mind for me is overconfidence bias sometimes, and going
Oh,
back to why experts like us are needed.
mhm,
We help to regulate, as you just said it there, these emotions, that feeling of, oh, I've got this. Oh, I can handle I don't know what y'all talking about. My risk tolerance is fine. My capacity is fine. Well,
mhm.
sometimes we can be our own worst enemies. So I
Yes.
feel like our most important job is that of really, like we said, your coaches to really help you stay on track and get to the end of this race. That's how we
Mhm.
operate. And I'm sure you would agree with me, Mark.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
So, as we wrap up this episode, let's really understand that at the end of the day, risk tolerance and risk capacity aren't just about financial terms, even though we talk about it as such, but they're not just financial terms. They are guardrails to protect your legacy. Okay, I want you just to have that visual. And I use that all the time with our clients: guardrails, boundaries. You hear these words. If you really understand how to use and navigate both of these, not only will you avoid unnecessary losses, and oh my goodness, like save so much in unnecessary losses, you also give yourself
Mhm.
permission to pursue opportunities that actually align with your goals, your values, your purpose. So when you're able to eliminate the distractions, when you're able to regulate your emotions and get in alignment with what actually matters to you, it will make a world of difference in your life.
Marcella, I want to piggyback on the phrase that you say often, freedom within a framework. And as you mentioned, the guardrails, I just had this vision of uh, driving over. In our case here, we're over here in the East Coast, the DMV area, so we're not too far from the Chesapeake Bay Bridge, which is a very tall, long bridge. And one of the things that I didn't know was that there are people that are literally terrified of crossing over that bridge or any bridge that's high. And so, as you were talking about the guardrails, I couldn't help but to think the freedom for these individuals to be able to travel over the bridge is that fact that there are guardrails on the side of that bridge, you know, to make sure that they will stay on the right path, right, so that they can get to the other side. Their freedom, right, getting over to the other side. And even for myself, who's not afraid of crossing over the bridge, I'm pretty sure I might be a little bit more concerned if there was no guardrails. Now, I'd still be driving on the same lane, but without those guardrails there, the perspective is different. So I just want you to understand that when we say guardrails, it's not just about, oh, I'm going to be restrained, because some people do think that. It's not about being restrained. It's about creating the environment that will allow you to be free and getting to your goals and achieving the things you need to do that. But to do that, we need to make sure we remove those outside forces that are working against your goal. And
That
that's what
is
the guardrails are there for. So I just wanted to share that piece here. And if you found this conversation resonating with you, then take the next step and download our free legacy clarity workbook that Marcella mentioned earlier. You can do that at legacypregamepodcast.com. It will help you reflect on your tolerance, measure your capacity, and it will help you be able to map out your next move. That's what this is all about. Not just listening to what we're discussing, but taking actions. And don't forget to subscribe to the Legacy Pregame Podcast so you'll never miss a conversation and help you shift your legacy.
absolutely,
So
Mark. Well, what's next is until next time. We're wrapping it up here. Listen, thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode. Until next time, live well, build wisely,
and prepare with purpose.